Time now is 7:32. So, the recent bushfires in Australia were some of the worst the country has seen in decades. And the places had a devastating impact on homes, landscape and, of course, local wildlife.
Our next guest was so moved by what he saw, he decided to visit for himself and see what could be done to help. We'll speak to survival expert Ray Mears in just a moment. First, though, let's have a look at the enormous toll on wildlife that these fires have had. So, really desperate scenes, actually. Let's speak to Ray Mears, who joins us now from Kangaroo Island. Thanks so much for joining us and talking to us. We've just been looking at some of the impact of those devastating fires. You were really moved by what had happened, weren't you?
Yes, Louise, I came here a couple of years ago to make a wildlife documentary, and when I came to Kangaroo Island I didn't really quite know what to expect, and actually this island touched me. The wildlife here is very special. There's a special atmosphere on Kangaroo Island, so I was really concerned, having seen the news reports, to come and see with my own eyes what the state of play was and what can be done.
And what is the state of play?
Well, it's been really interesting. You'll have seen in the news the devastating images of the fires that swept across the west side of the island, which really took people by surprise here. But the eastern side of the island is unaffected. In fact, in many areas you could drive around, you'd have no idea there'd been a fire. It's been a trauma for the community. But of course, they're island people, they're Australian, they're as tough as nails, and they're rebuilding and they're pulling their lives together. I've been speaking to all sorts of people, farmers who've had their houses burned down and they've lost half of their livestock, people rescuing wildlife who literally have dealt with what is the equivalent of a war zone. They've an amazing stories of selflessness and degrees of heroism as well. But what's really interesting, Louise, is that the news reports have shown the island devastated, and they've said that the western half of the island's been destroyed, and that's not really the case at all. This is a landscape where fire is a shaping influence. And what's really surprised me is the state of regeneration that I've seen here. I've seen trees that are burned charcoal lumps with fresh new leaves already emerging from them. So nature's regenerating itself at a remarkable rate here. And it's actually heartening, and some...
Sorry to interrupt you. Let me just, we're just seeing pictures now of the, and we spoke to people there at this rescue centre, or became a rescue centre for koalas. I mean, what sort of percentage have survived, and how are they doing?
So it's an amazing story. So there's this wildlife park. It's not a wildlife hospital, and in the heat of the crisis, and still people were bringing into them, because they had nowhere else to go, injured animals, particularly koalas. They had 600 koalas brought in, of which they've been able to save 250. And they've even already managed to rewild and place back into nature 20 of those koalas, which is astonishing. And it's an amazing story. They had no facilities, and almost overnight they were able to create a wildlife hospital. They've had volunteers who've gone and helped them. They've had people come in with injured animals who have brought them in despite the fact that their own homes had been burned to the ground. So the whole community has really rallied around the wildlife, which is great news. And I have to say that the donations that came from Britain have made a tremendous impact in this environment.
And we're just, just looking at you standing there on that beach, it's a truly beautiful place. What do you think the long-term impact is going to be?
The long-term impact is it'll get back up on its feet. Fires are a constant threat here. They're a constant feature of this environment. There have been fires in the past, not as big as this one in recorded history. And things will get back to normal. I mean, the biggest threat now to the community is people cancelling their holidays. 50% of this island's income comes from tourism, and there's really no reason not to come here. And by coming here, people actually contribute to the economy and to the conservation effort. So the news is basically Australia's still open for business. The press reports gave the impression that all of Australia had burned, but if you combine all of the bushfires that have taken place, it's about 3% of the land. So really, you can travel here and not see any evidence of the fires.
Ray Mears on a stunning Kangaroo Island. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Thank you.